missile takes it down, or an earthquake can take it down. It was one of the two. It was a missile or an earthquake. So it'll be interesting to see how the Dome of the Rock goes down. Either way, the Jews are going to have their temple built. They're going to have it put up. And that's the one the Illuminati plans for their Antichrist to rule from. Of course, they don't call him their Antichrist. We call him the Antichrist. Call a spade a spade. And so that's, it's going to be interesting this year in Israel. I know I've always kept an eye, had always had an eye on America and Israel's relationship, because I always felt that America would betray Israel, and they are. And, so it's interesting to see this coming to light, because I've been watching it for 2 years, wondering if what I was feeling was actually ever going to come true, if it was just something I was feeling at the time. But I always felt that America would turn around and betray Israel. And when you look at the roadmap to hell that they devised, it's exactly what it does. It betrays the friendship with Israel. It calls for a Palestinian state on Israel territory. And George Bush isn't letting up on that. He's very adamant that he wants that Palestinian state in Jerusalem. And so Israel's going to be exactly what prophecy said. It's going to be boxed in a corner, the most hated nation on earth, and the nations aren't going to rise up against Israel. And Israel will defend itself. And the thing is, the Lord is going to be with Israel. They won't be able to be totally destroyed, although a remnant will survive. A lot of the city's going to see destruction, but it won't be completely annihilated. We're still looking at prophecies to be fulfilled. Look at the prophecy of Obadiah of all the Palestinians being destroyed. So I don't know why we need a Palestinian state there, because what's going to happen is Israel's going to stand up and just annihilate every one of them. And so this whole thing we're trying to establish a Palestinian state, at that point it's going to be moot, because there's going to be none left. Every one of them will be annihilated off the land of Israel. Another prophecy that remains to be seen is Damascus being turned into a parking lot, Damascus being flattened, and we're still waiting for that one. So those are two prophecies yet to be fulfilled. That could be fulfilled any day, and we see these things going on in the Middle East. One of the largest alignments that have come together, Russia and China and Iran and Brazil, and now Venezuela, and we're talking a bulk of the world's population right there, because all the Arabs will align with the Russians. The Russians have been giving them weapons for years and building their arsenals. And of course we did the same thing. We built up Saddam Hussein, and then we turned around and invaded him. So it's madness. It's all just a big game in the Middle East. They gave him the weapons of mass destruction they were trying to refine. They gave him his military, built him up, and so did the Russians. The Russians are now doing the same with Iran. And if the United States goes to war against Iran, we could very much see Russian retaliation for doing so. Iran and Russia have an alliance together. I don't think Russia's going to sit back and watch the United States attack Iran and not do anything. And we know that it's the army from the north, that will come down against Israel in the last days. Once the king of the south starts to push towards Israel, then the army of the north will come down. And so the king of the south, obviously being the Arabs, I know Egypt right now probably would be considered one of the superpowers over there with the Arabs. That's just going to be interesting. It's always interesting with Israel. Keep your eyes on Israel. If you want to know where we are in prophetic time clock, I know we have a physical land of Israel and then a spiritual Israel, where most of the Israeli tribes today are here in America. Most people belong to an Israeli tribe, don't know who they are. Most can't even imagine that the Israelites of old were fair-skinned. They are not the dark-skinned Jews that are in Israel today. The New World Order Zionist Jews in Israel today are not real Jews. They're the Khazar Jews. You could do a research on that on the internet, the Khazar Jews. And they're not real bloodline, but they think they are, and they're not real bloodline. They're the Khazar Jews. And, more importantly, the Bible says, what does the Lord call a Jew? And of course, the Jews back then weren't even called Jews. Jews is a slang term that Americans, King James and Americans, referred to all Judahites, all 12 tribes of the Israelites as Jews. And it's not necessarily so. It's just a sweeping generalization of all the tribes, calling them all Jews when they weren't. They were Jews being a slang term for the Judahites, and that was only one tribe out of 12 out of Israel. Listener, call on line 260-356-2611. I'm going to go through here and read some prophecies. I know I get sidetracked. I'm always on a rabbit trail somewhere. And start with the 12th century from St. Hildegard, who prophesied the time is coming when princes and peoples will reject the authority of the Pope. Some countries will prefer their own church rulers to the Pope. The German Empire will be divided. And you know what happens to countries who prefer their own church rulers over the Pope. He destroys the countries. Vietnam, the Yugoslavian War, Christian Serbs destroyed. Anybody who won't let the Catholics dominate their country ends up in a war. And of course, who do they use? The USA. They use the USA military to go bomb these little countries and bomb them into submission to accept Roman Catholicism. Another one, before the comet comes, many nations, the good accepted, will be scourged by want and famine. I thought this was noticed before the comet comes. The great nation in the ocean that is inhabited by people of different tribes and descent will be devastated by earthquake, storm, and tidal wave. And that's us, folks. That's the United States. It would be divided and in great part submerged. That nation will also have many misfortunes at sea and lose its colonies. And I was trying to think of this. What exactly is our colonies? Puerto Rico, Hawaii, and we're going back to the islands again, and we have more people on these islands to get to mainland. A comet hits, that's it for all the islands. They're all going to disappear. Japan, Hawaii, Puerto Rico. A lot of people, especially listeners, on a lot of these little islands, and folks, pray for the Lord lead you off of these islands to get you a way to get to mainland. And certainly when you get to mainland, don't head for a coastal city. The coasts are going down, too, all the way around the world. Doesn't matter what nation you're in. The coasts are going to be sinking in. After the great comet, the great nation will be devastated by earthquakes, storms, and great waves of water, causing much want and plagues. The ocean will also flood many other countries, so that all coastal cities will live in fear, with many destroyed. All seacoast cities will be fearful, and many of them will be destroyed by tidal waves, and most living creatures will be killed, and even those who escape will die from a horrible disease. For in none of those cities does a person live according to the laws of God. A powerful wind will rise in the north, carrying heavy fog and the densest dust, and it will fill their throats and eyes so that they will cease their butchery and be stricken with a great fear. Sounds like a big chemtrail. one of their chemtrails is, and I've said before that a lot of these chemtrails we're seeing now are going to become very deadly. They're just going to come out, right? Instead of making people sick, they're going to come out and kill them because they'll be filled with poison with the intent to kill people. Their intent's going to change during the tribulation period. So that was interesting. And this is from St. Hildegard, the 12th century. Talking about the United States, talking about this comet. This comet that's coming, and I don't know if this is the Atlantic comet. If this is the Atlantic comet, it would take out much of the east coast of America, and it would also take out England and the UK. It would take a huge chunk out of them. Of course, they don't look good any way you look at it, because if there's a minor pole shift, it's going to be England that becomes the new North Pole. And